This is a business, and it's the business of warfare.
They're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Don't sleep. This is the GogoPoda UFC show, UFC 308 reaction show, and it's going to be a fun one because we had a fun time today. With me, been a terrorist since the public school era, Mr. Scott Barrett. How was your Saturday, brother?
It was great, man. It was an awesome Saturday. I had a football live stream that our loyal subscribers were really mad I pushed back, but I had to do it. This card was just too awesome. Yeah, this is our first ever reaction pod, by the way. This is exciting.
It's monumental. Just a sign of big things for the GogoPoda UFC show. Anybody listening right now, please make sure you go and find us on the YouTube channel at GogoPoda UFC. Pretty awesome reception on the first YouTube episode as well, so we hope that keeps growing. Make sure you leave a comment, and all that jazz cabbage. Of course, at GogoPoda UFC on Instagram and on x.com. Had some good live tweeting happening today, Scott, and I'm not going to do any more sweet nothings here because we're going to get right into it, because what a day today was at UFC 308. The first question I want to ask, I want to start with vibes here, Scott, just as vibes coming out of the card here, okay? So what are your vibes coming out of that UFC 308 card that we just witnessed today?
It was amazing. It was glorious. It was fireworks, and it lived up to the hype. I was saying this is, one of the sexiest cards of the year, at least since, 299, 300, 301. Those were all great, but in a while, and it really lived up to the hype. I thought it was an absolute blast.
Yeah, dude, from start to finish, even the prelim curtain jerker was a super, super exciting fight. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good take.
Well, especially for me, like,
yeah, I was just gonna say,
I'm not as into the weeds I'm not as into the weeds as like TJ and Stefan. I'm still very much like a novice when it comes to the UFC. So I really just judge by either like the top two fights or the whole main card. And that's what I did for this fight. It was the whole main card except for one guy, Myktybek Oralbai. And that was fight of the night, and the main card was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, he of ancestral DNA, Myktybek Oralbai. And we're going to go through all of it. We're going to try and keep her tight, keep her under an hour here for the people. So let's start with that top of the bill, Scott. Ilia Topuria regains his featherweight title as the first man ever to knock out one Max blessed Holloway. That was almost surreal to watch, Scott. I think, Max Holloway was having quite a bit of success in those first two rounds. Ilia was not deterred. He continued to come forward, continued to blast those combinations that he's so known for. And one of them hit, and we saw some shit we've never seen before out of Max Holloway as far as getting put out, essentially. Ilia Topuria is a destroyer, and you were saying this all along, Scott. So as we look here, I had some notes that I had sent to you before. Ilia Topuria now has beat Alex Volkanovski and Max Holloway 2 fights in a row. So if we look at the pound for pound rankings, Scott, where would you say that Ilia Topuria falls in that, being that he's beat 2 of the previous best pound for pound fighters in a row?
I don't know. I think there's a case to be made for 1. I think you can make that. If you look at who Islam has beaten, who Alex has beaten, I think 1.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close to that. I think I'd probably give Islam the edge just in thinking about the pound for pound. If they were to go against each other at the same weight, I think Islam probably might take that edge. But I think for me, he's probably firmly in that number 2 spot. John Jones is inactive. Alex Pereira definitely. I think some of the aura and the personality around Alex might make people want him to be in front of Ilia. But I think pound for pound, talent for talent, skill for skill, Ilia is right up at the top. That was a crazy fight. Like, what were you thinking when you saw Max get dusted like that?
So I wasn't surprised at all. And buried lead here is hashtag Scott was right.
Yeah.
Nailed it with Khamzat's dominant performance, nailed it with Ilia Topuria's dominant performance. And so I thought, it wasn't particularly close, where Ilia was eating up Max's leg. He just looked so much faster, so much stronger. And so you could say it was like kind of an even fight on paper, although two of the judges had Ilia winning both of the first 2 rounds, which is what I would have had it at. But the whole, like, even if it was like sort of even, you could say it's just Ilia has that devastating trump card, especially for that division, which is insane power. And so I called Ilia. This is like TJ's the sage. He's the UFC betting expert. But I've learned one thing from doing the show. It is there are levels to this shit. And for the uber elite prospects, I think Islam's up there. I think Khamzat's up there. I think Ilya's up there. Is just, you cannot bet against them. Built different. They're power law fighters. It's just on another level. And that's how I was viewing Ilia. And yeah, it was just, I picked Ilia. I was rooting for Max. And the whole time I'm just like, that one shot KO is bound to land. He's getting closer and he's getting closer, and otherwise it's even, but that is just the ultimate trump card. And we saw it land. Max supposedly has the granite chin, but I don't know that we've seen a fighter in this weight class with this sort of power since prime McGregor. And we all remember what he did and what he was up to. So yeah, I think he's going to go on an extremely long reign. You look at the odds for him versus Volk or him versus Diego Lopez, they're exactly the same. I love Volk, and I'm like, I don't like this fight. I'm scared. It's going to make me sad. I know how this ends. Him at this age, coming off of 2 KOs with a weaker chin, that makes me sad. And I just think I think Ilia is going to go on a long run, and he is going to go down in history as one of the greatest of all time 20 years from now.
I think that's pretty well put, and it's hard to argue after what we just saw today. I think what I really like about Ilia Topuria is how he carries himself, right? He comes in with uber confidence. He's in a spot right now where he could easily be one of the biggest heels in the UFC, to use a wrestling term, because he just beat 2 of the biggest fan favorites in Volk and Max Holloway. But I think he's played this perfectly, especially with kind of the post-fight where he turned it around into a respect thing, to where the people aren't going to turn on him. And they're going to be with him in that superstar kind of rocket ship that he is on right now. So I think not only in the cage, outside of the cage, he is playing it incredibly. And I don't think there's anything more gangster than putting down a single rose when you just dusted some guy in a UFC league.
So I want to talk about this because I brought this up on our last show, where it's like, I'm into sports psychology and I think all that stuff really matters. And I was saying, it looked to me like Ilia 10-8'd Max in the pre-fight, where, the face-off, Ilia was saying, I'm the best fighter in the world. I'm the best fighter in the world. And Max was just standing there nodding his head yes, which is like such a subconscious L, a psychological L. So that wasn't great. And then he did exactly what I expected to happen, which was he started off the fight by pointing to the center of the cage, and Max backed down, which is, again, another psychological L, a subconscious L, and a psychology win for Ilia. And so, like, unreal, insane confidence, that matters. Again, I talked about him just being like a knockoff RC Cola, Conor McGregor in some ways, where Conor had that, the insane uber confidence where he manifested everything, where he Mystic Mac, he called all of his shots in the rounds, he won it in. But here's a secret about confidence is, like, fake it till you make it work. So if you have issues with women, like, here's what you do: fake it till you make it. If you have issues with that, fake it, it works. And so just the fact that he's saying that he's this confident, and it looks like it, and I believe him, that's real. Like, there's all these psychological studies that have been done where it's like optimistic people live longer on average, and like all this other stuff like that. But for baseball players, they took baseball players and they had them, when they were in the on deck circle, imagine themselves hitting a home run. And then another subset of people doing nothing. And then another subset of people imagining themselves striking out. The ones who imagined themselves hitting a home run had a slugging percentage like 5 standard deviation points above the people who did nothing, and then like twice as much as the people who imagine themselves straight. So like, I think all that matters. And you see that with NFL, Russell Wilson, George has like a mindset coach, George Kittle meditates every Saturday night, like positive visualization, imagines himself scoring a touchdown, all that. And so I think he's doing all the right things. I think he's a generational fighter where he is an elite boxer, an amazing knockout artist. And then don't forget, he came to the UFC as this elite guy on the ground, elite grappler, and he doesn't even need to use it to take down these legends. So yeah, I can't imagine any sort of scenario where I'm betting against Ilia over the next few years. I'm just, all in on this guy.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I think like a guy like Diego Lopez might present some problems for Ilia Topuria, but I thought that Max Holloway would present the ultimate problems in that range. And where I differ from you is that I think he was very successful in those early rounds. I thought he took the first, and then I thought Ilia actually took the second. So just kind of shows how close. It's kind of the Max show, right? Popping him with those less powerful shots. But power reigned supreme. So it'll be interesting to see where Ilia goes. There's talk about Volk in kind of February, March. I have a hard time seeing Ilia going to Australia to defend his title against Volk.
I think they're going to Spain. I think Dana has been licking his chops over the potential to go to Spain. So I really think that's what they're going to do. And I watched Volk's post-fight reaction. He kind of just like waved off that as a possibility. And he's like, I think it's Spain. So, but yeah, I'm down to go to Spain. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I just think that means that it probably happens a little bit later in the year, because I think they probably have a little bit work left to do on Spain,
for sure,
as opposed to already having a wicked deal in Australia. They usually do that one in the first quarter. So will be interesting to see the landscape unfold nonetheless at the top of the featherweight division, because it's always pretty interesting. Moving down to one you mentioned there, Scott, Khamzat Chimaev, like a mythical performance that he had today. I don't even know how to explain it. The guy, like when he has somebody down, he almost floats on top of them like a membrane that's attached to them or something. Because you were talking about it in the chat, the way he uses the cage, the way he just kind of wedges himself into positions where the other guy can't move. It was unreal. And I'll put the picture up here, Scott, of Robert Whittaker's jaw. But
God,
he was panic tapping. And for good reason. Maybe contrary to TJ's belief in there. TJ wanted him to stick it out a little bit. But I don't know how you're sticking that one out when the entire front of your teeth are pushed in. So thoughts on Khamzat, thoughts on his rise, thoughts on that fucking choke. Fire it off, Scott.
Whittaker's jaw was fractured in 2 places so his like front 4 teeth were like laying on his tongue. This is so metal. Like if you're, some people might just finish it up, but like if you're a diehard UFC, like this is so, and dude, what a freak Khamzat is. And this is exactly what I was talking about, where like legendary fighter, elite fighter, he might be the strongest pound for pound fighter in the UFC. He might be the scariest pound for pound. I mean, we just talked about pound for pound Ilia. Like, why not Khamzat in there? How many more wins does he need to get there? But like, in terms of who's making me piss my pants, if I was getting in a ring with this, he choked him and fractured his freaking jaw. Whittaker, a legend who hasn't been submitted since, I don't know, 1999.
He was a welterweight.
Maybe when we're big enough, we could have our own Discord channel, because our Discord DMs were great. But
that'd be fun.
I was thinking about Julius Caesar's commentary on the Gaelic Wars, with famous novel, I guess. And in it, he talks about how each Gaelic fighter was worth, you throw out weapons, you throw out armor, you throw out whatever. Each Gaelic fighter was worth like 4 Romans, right? But each Germanic fighter was worth like 6 times that. And he talks about their like berserker strength, where they they're in this like trance-like state, and like the battle starts. They rush at insane speed with insane, like literally unbelievable power. And that's who Khamzat reminds me of more than anyone. Like berserker strength and like whip fast, double leg takedowns. And then, like I said, he uses the cage better than anyone else, and just insane strength, like superhuman strength that I don't know anyone else can rival. Just an elite fighter. I think he steamrolls through everyone. I think DDP is no sweat. I certainly don't think Strickland's a sweat, and I know they've fought, they practiced together, and apparently he's embarrassed him, just like Khamzat has embarrassed Olympic wrestlers. So, like, yeah, what do you do with this guy? Just absolutely insane, unreal, dominant performance, insane superhuman strength. And like I said, we might not have ever seen his true potential, where he was battling severe illnesses. We don't know what was going on, but like, he looks like a different person. Hashtag handsome Khamzat, right? That's what it's called. Yeah. And like, totally different personality, totally different look. He looked absolutely incredible. I think there's something to that. I think that's real. And yeah, it's crazy to think that we might, and like the last fight, you know, he like tore a ligament in his wrist. I think that's why he looked sloppy in the third round of that fight. Yeah, man, I'm excited to see DDP versus Khamzat. I know TJ still is a true believer in DDP, but yeah, I don't know, man. I don't see any way I'm betting against Khamzat in the foreseeable. Khamzat versus Khabib, I don't even know anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah. The only way I'm questioning is if he's going up to heavyweight or something like that, and he's going to be trying to take those hog mollies down. But I mean,
Khamzat versus Alex. Who do you get? Who do you
Khamzat, man? Like, because he doesn't even disguise. Like, he's shooting at you from like 15 feet away, and he's taking you down. And he's gonna maul you. It was just a mauling. You see Robert Whittaker getting up. Khamzat's just get back down. Like, that just seems like it would be grueling to go through. And I don't see anybody who's really going to be able to stop that animal from doing it. And
I don't know if this is TJ's word, wrestle fuck. That's what he does to people.
It's fitting. It's fitting. Yeah. He impregnates them.
It is scary. It is scary.
Yeah. Very scary. And it's interesting. You were talking about where does he go from here? Because there's actually a chance that we don't see Khamzat DDP right away, because seems like they're lining up DDP.
They want South
John
Africa.
Strickland.
Yeah.
So Strickland's going to get the next shot. We don't want him to lose
in South Africa. So it's,
yeah,
I think it's going to be Sean in South Africa, and then Khamzat, and then he goes on a very long reign so long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, whoever it is just keeping that belt warm, because I don't see Boers relinquishing it. He will.
I mean, if I were
everybody,
if I were DDP, I would rather face Alex than Khamzat. For real.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, because DDP's got some of that strength. Could probably just kind of brute force Alex to the ground kind of thing, whereas you're not going to brute force Khamzat. And it's really hard to see anybody out brute forcing him, you know? And that's DDP's game. That's what DDP does.
Right.
It's crazy. Okay, so the feature bout kind of went as expected, I would say. Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakic. Magomed put on a good showing. Rakic had some moments early with some of the kicks, but wasn't able to keep it going. Kind of seems like Magomed should be next for that Alex Pereira title shot, which we were just talking about, but we know the UFC kind of hates him, Scott. So how do you think that fight was for him, as far as vaulting him into maybe the positive ire, if that makes sense, of the UFC?
So Dana said for sure he's next, but I was underwhelmed. Personally, I was underwhelmed. Like, Rakic, I thought did great, and like, this guy is so unlucky, but like really underrated. So he was, I don't know, basically like 13-0 minus one controversial split decision. And then he tore his ACL in a fight. And then he was in the hospital with staph like 3 days before his other fight, where he looked great in round one, gassed out in the second round. And this fight, it was 1-1 going into the third, and his corner told him he was up 2-0. He takes his foot off the gas. And so, yeah, like I feel really bad for this guy. I think I would have liked to see him go full throttle in that last round. And I was pretty underwhelmed by Ankalaev, you know, for a guy who's supposed to be elite, who is 20-1. It was a really close fight. He didn't look dominant by any means to me. I think Alex beats him easily when they fight. And I do think he's next. But I'll just say I wasn't particularly all that impressed. Although he did
Yeah.
say, I watched his post fight. He said, Rakic really surprised him. He, had an answer for what he wanted to do that he didn't expect. And I don't know, but
I mean, if you're in a title fight, you got to adjust for that, right? But
right.
I was kind of in the same boat too, in that it almost seemed, because he was faster, he did look pretty sharp when he was going. It almost seemed like he could have dominated that fight, but he didn't have that next gear to be able to put it into to really put a stamp on it. And then, like he kind of said I didn't get to watch the post-fight presser, but in his interview, he said he was kind of chasing Rakic around and it was hard to find him. So I think Rakic did a pretty good job at avoiding some of that. And I think, Magomed Ankalaev is nowhere near bulletproof for Alex Pereira. So I think like the narrative around him not getting a shot is that he's really boring, or the UFC doesn't want him to fight Alex because he'll just dummy him. And I think it's he hasn't really given us any performances to show that he's going to dummy Alex, right? If he resorts to that wrestling, fine. But what we've seen from him is that he doesn't resort to that until he's compromised, and he's going to stand and bang with you for most of the fight. So what kind of wrestling is he going to give to Alex if it's like 4th round, 5th round when he's tired? Now he's gassed. Now he's taking shots. So I'm kind of with you. I think Alex probably dusts him up just with some of that IQ and then just the sharpness and the fact that Ankalaev is not going to be checking any leg kicks and Alex is just going to shatter that thing. So, it's going to be interesting to see, but it should be next. And you said Dana said it's next. So
yeah. I will just say, I mean, he did take it to the ground and he certainly has that edge over Alex. And I think Dana told him he needed an exciting fight to get to Alex. And so he promised he wouldn't take it to the ground, something like that. And so he didn't. And maybe I'm sure it would have been a more dominant fight had he done that. But I don't know. It wasn't super entertaining to me. It wasn't super dominant to me. But that could just be because I kind of liked Rakic as a somewhat live dog in this fight.
Yeah, for sure. Pour one out for some of these main card dogs.
Yeah.
Tough day for those guys. Lerone Murphy ekes one out against Dan Ige, like ekes one out big time. I have to be honest, I had some stuff going on at the house and I missed a couple minutes of this 3rd round, but what I did see of it looked like a little bit of Dan Ige control, a little bit of really good wrestling scrambles, but wrestling scrambles where Dan Ige was the aggressor and Lerone Murphy was kind of being defensive and trying to get out of what Dan Ige was doing to him. I don't know if you saw the whole fight, Scott, if you saw it any different, but how did you see this? Was it a good decision? And what do you see for Lerone Murphy going forward, especially after that Josh Emmett call out that you were dogging him for a little bit in the chat?
No, I was in and out of this fight too, so I didn't get a great look at it. It looked really close to me from what I saw, or the parts that I did see. Yeah, I was dogging him for the Josh Emmett call it. I just think Emmett destroys him. But I'm a big Josh Emmett guy. I mean, we just saw him like that Bryce Mitchell knockout. It's gonna haunt my dreams for years. I just think he's really good, really underrated. I think he could knock out or like really hurt this fighter who doesn't have a ton of experience. Yeah, that was when I became a true believer in Ilya.
Beating.
But
Josh
that was the toughest fight, arguably Ilya's had was Josh Emmett instead of not Max, not Volkanovski, but Emmett.
Yeah, that or even Jai Herbert. If you go further back into his career, Jai Herbert almost knocked him out, and Ilya came back and
that was a crazy fight.
That was insane. That knockout just crumbling like limp spaghetti. It was crazy. It was crazy. Like cooked spaghetti, but same deal. Good fight. I kind of like Lerone Murphy. I like kind of the smoothness. We talked about this going in on the episode last week, that it was kind of a clean versus dirty matchup where Lerone Murphy was going to want to pick apart on the outside. Dan Ige was going to want to get in and make it dirty. And we kind of saw that. Ige was successful when it was dirty. Lerone Murphy was successful when it was clean. And I think that probably came out on top, but I have a hard time seeing, like, I kind of think Dan Ige might have edged out that 3rd round from what I saw, but who knows? I think Lerone Murphy's call out of Josh Emmett, I think it was a good call out from like a PR standpoint, definitely for like a future brain function standpoint, maybe not the best because Josh Emmett throwing those soup bones that he's got, but I really think it would be a good career move if he were to get that fight, because you never know. could happen. This is MMA. We saw some crazy shit tonight, so we could see some crazy shit again. If he were to do that, that would really propel Lerone Murphy's career as a guy who's a little bit unheralded coming up the ranks and now fighting really good competition. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. I think Dan Ige just kind of falls into that fun fight gatekeeper type dude. Always going to watch his fights though. He's a fan favorite. We love Dan Ige. He cemented that after the Diego Lopez fight. So that's all I got for this one. Scott, you got anything else to wrap up the Murphy and Ige fight?
No, not really.
Beauty. Okay, this one's going to be fun. Shara Bullet, as advertised, Scott. He beats Armen Petrosyan with not one, but a double back fist knockout. If you haven't seen it anywhere on social media, which there's a good chance that you might not have unless the UFC posted it, you got to see this knockout. He like probably 75% hits the first one, but then the second one that he comes back with is like wrist, forearm, right to the face. You get the distorted face, the like crazy looking mouth going on, flapping in the wind with Petrosyan. That was awesome. We were going crazy in the chat, which is why it would be kind of fun to have a Discord with some fans. So if anybody's listening to this and they think that would be a good idea, hop in the comments and let us know if you'd like to get in on the tilt with us on Saturdays. But this one was so good. Shara Bullet, I mean, obviously there's the restriction geographically as to where he can fight, Scott, but how high do you think
a few states in the
for
US where he can fight?
Oh, really? I didn't necessarily hear that. I did hear that if old Donnie gets back into office, this might be a bit of a non-issue. So
right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I also thought it was hilarious that in one of the earlier fights, they had to check a guy's eye to make sure he could see out of both eyes to fight. You have a fighter who's like blind and what are you doing?
Yeah. Oralbai almost got stopped because he was only fighting with one eye. Yeah, that thing was gnarly, and we'll get there.
Yeah. So the first ever double spinning back fist KO in UFC history. There's only ever been 10. Just with a one spinning back, and this was a double. So insanely cool. He said he practiced this ever since he was a kid, and he's never landed it. And this is dude, an awesome fighter, really entertaining fights, a really entertaining character. And he called out Izzy, dude, let's do that. That seems awesome. That seems like a lot of fun. I say, so TJ says he's a fraud. You put him up against any halfway decent grappler, he's going to get submitted. And I say, yeah, that's probably true. Let's not do that. He is so much fun. Let's just keep putting him up against kickboxers and like see how he does, please. Because this dude is so entertaining. And I say the dude literally looks like a pirate. He literally has one eye. I talked about this when he made his UFC debut though. He's probably not a good guy. There's a video of him cold clock knocking out a dude at a mall for no reason. But he fights that dude and like kind of loses. Like,
oh no.
It's Russia where maybe everyone in Russia is like an absolute badass, but he like fights this dude and like kind of loses on the ground where they're like wrestling. And so Shara has to wait outside of the mall and then just cold clocks him when he's not looking and like knocks him out. But so like TJ's probably right. Like any like brown belt or whatever could take him down, but just I like the entertainment. So like let's keep giving him guys who stand up and bang.
I would want nothing less from a pirate looking dude than sucker punches at the mall. So I think that's absolutely awesome. And he's kind of what we said he is, right? I honestly think Izzy probably dusts him up for the reason that he is still so hittable. Like Shara Bullet is so hittable. That hair is getting bounced all over the place from time to time. Petrosyan hit him with some really good shots where if it's a more elite level guy, I think that spells trouble for Shara
Petrosyan went for the groin kick, and then Shara also went for the groin kick. But if we were in his corner, he for sure would have won with just a eye poke warning.
Exactly.
Point deduction, and then you're just knock out a blind fighter.
Yeah, if you didn't see the episode last week or the short that I posted, we were just saying like take the warning from the referee and give him a real good poke to the eye, and then he's a blind fighter. So
like if you look at like the most plus EV things you could do in sports, groin strikes and eye pokes are so like you just
Up there.
You get a warning and that's it. But like a guy will continue fighting half blind for the rest of the fight.
Yeah, or with one of his nuts in his mouth. Like,
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Yeah, so that was a great fight. I'm super excited to see where Shara Bullet goes. It's going to be interesting to see how high they put him up those rankings. I don't think he's getting that Izzy fight yet, obviously, but he's going to be peaking at that top 15 pretty soon. And I kind of think the UFC might put him on a little bit of that Alex Pereira path where he gets those kickboxer guys, because the pop he gets in places like Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia could really help them grow those markets if he were to get big and get up near those elite guys. So I could see them continuing to grow Shara Bullet. And I mean, yeah, you don't really want to feed him to the hounds unless you have to. So good to see.
TJ hates Dagestan, so I can see why he wants that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll let TJ kind of dive into that one. Maybe we'll have a bonus piece where it's a full breakdown of TJ's hatred for the Daggies. So going through the prelims, Scott, we'll kind of try and
it's like the Hatfield and McCoys, except it's the Kalkins and the Medovs
and the Ovs. Yeah,
yeah, just last name that ends in Ov.
Funny note as well. Who Abus Magomedov, we'll get to his fight, but Bruce Buffer called him Nurmagomedov today when his last name's Magomedov. So Bruce Buffer had Khabib on the brain, I think, tonight. Ibo Aslan versus Rafael Sequeira. Aslan, I was informed after not being a part of the joke that Aslan was a bit of a pod favorite after his fight with the Pleasure Man, where he took the dub home.
He's like the unofficial mascot of GogoPoda is the
Pleasure Man. That. Yeah. Okay, I like that. Yeah, I was trying to call Aslan the Turkish delight in the chat, but you informed me that his nickname is actually the Last Ottoman, which is pretty gangster, and I think that's pretty fitting for the performance that he had. I did not see a ton of this fight. I saw the replay of the knockout there, Scott, but did you see the whole fight? How did it go down? It seemed like it was pretty quick, and that knockout looked like this guy's gonna be a bit of a problem.
No, I'll be honest. I missed just about all of the prelims doing NFL research, except for, my guy Myktybek. I had to watch that fight. So I didn't get a great look at this, but and I watched Farad Basharat. I'm a pretty big fan of his. So, but those were really the only two fights I got a great look at. So apologies, not going to.
No apologies needed, man. I'll give a couple Cole's notes on some of the ones that I watched here, and then we'll talk about those ones. So Jeff Neal RDA ended in an unfortunate circumstance. RDA seems like he tore an ACL or something. He said he heard his knee pop. I think it was actually not going his way. Jeff Neal dropped him shortly before that, and then hit him with another good shot, and then RDA's knee popped. So didn't really see how that goes, but it is a TKO win for Jeff Neal. So it'll be good to see what his next fight is. He's kind of in that Dan Ige mold of exciting guy to watch. We'll watch his fights, but probably not going to be going up for a title. Abus Magomedov versus Bruno Ferreira was kind of uneventful at first. Abus looked pretty good. This guy is fucking jacked. Like, that guy was insane. He had just crazy shredded back and stuff like that, and looked way bigger than Bruno Ferreira. But Ferreira dummied him in the second with a big punch, and then he got him with a head kick when he was coming up. But Abus resorted to some of that wrestling in the third. Bruno tagged a couple shots in the third, but then Abus went right to his wrestling and got the arm triangle finish. So yeah, that was a big one for Abus Magomedov. I think it's a good little reset for him, Scott. He came in with a lot of hype. He was put pretty high on cards, facing some really good talent. So this seems kind of like dropping him back to where maybe he should have come into the UFC to kind of start his ascension again. So I think that was a good start for what could be a really exciting name in the future.
Yeah, I think he was clearly losing that fight to me, and I said he was the worst Magomedov ever, or something like that. But he pulled it out in the end, so kudos to him.
Yeah, kind of like Ankalaev, where I was talking about if he's compromised, it's just wrestle.
I mean, you also look at his losses, right? That. He lost to Cal. I can never.
Borralho. Hey, drink.
Who is
Kyle
awesome.
Borralho. Yeah, he
lost to Sean Strickland. It was a champ for a minute. So yeah, maybe there's something there.
Just a reset for Abus Magomedov. And then Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Chris Barnett, that massive height difference that we talked about.
Oh, I watched this one.
Yeah, this was kind of fun while it lasted, just kind of watching these two fight each other just for their sheer size. Chris Barnett actually seems like he had some issues with one of his knees where he did the big jump up in the pre-fight introduction and did something to his knee, and he was
In
just
the
compromised
pre-fight?
the whole. Yeah, well, I saw like you could see in the fight where he kind of steps down and it really is like, okay, now it's over for him.
Oh
But if you
no.
watch the pre-fight, you know how the guys are getting pumped up and they do that big jump where they bring their knees up like this and then land. He just busted his leg out there. You could see him almost fall over, and then he leaned back against the fence and he was grimacing. You could see his coach almost, that who, they sit on top of the cage. His coach was just like, ooh, or something like that. So it looked like he did it at the beginning, which is so rough, right? Like it reminds me of Gus Frerotte from football, where he was super excited, hammered his head into one of like the padded walls, and he was concussed for the rest of the year. Like you hate to see
It happened
that.
to the 49ers in the Super Bowl. It's happened to a UFC fighter before too.
Yeah, a couple guys have done it. I think maybe Kevin Hall in a Kevin Holland fight, one of those guys did that or something like that. I can't remember fairly recently within the last 6 months. So sucks to see it though, because it just means that you didn't really get the fight that you were kind of hoping for. TKO for Kennedy Nzechukwu, which is kind of how I thought it was going to go. Whereas I think maybe the couple of the boys thought Chris Barnett was fairly live with them hands. So interesting fight while it lasted. Okay. Let's go back up to our boy. Let's talk about it. Mateusz Rebecki versus Myktybek Oralbai. Rebecki won a splitty in what was an absolutely incredible fight. Oralbai's eye got busted up early. The thing was like a baseball. No way he's seeing out of that, but he guessed right when the doctor asked him if he was holding up 2 fingers, and so he got to continue. So good on him. And that brings your one eye theory, right? Like let him fight. So that was a great, like, total fight of the night. I haven't even seen the presser. You saw the presser, so this had to have been fight of the night, right?
Oh, it was.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this was the best fight since Max Gaethje, I think.
It was up there, man.
Dude, it was so awesome. It wasn't a broken orbital, but it was like the nastiest welt. And then Mateusz had this nasty cut, was just bleeding all over him. You were watching the fight and they were like, oh, Oralbai's out. They're going to call it. They're going to call it. They're going to. All right. Now they're going to call it. They're going to call it. They didn't. And then Oralbai rebounded to the point where he was on top and Mateusz had 0 gas left and he was fight. And so, if you watch the show, we call him the early hominid just because he looks like he's from 80,000 BC. And
looks
so
like he discovered fire.
Yeah. And so it's like, wow, this, like, Stefan was like, this dude has a ton of heart. And I was like, yeah, did you know early hominids had a heart that was 160% larger than modern humans? And dude, just like an absolute fight where both guys come out. And these are 2 really exciting prospects to me now. I high on both of these guys.
Yeah, both of them showed really well for themselves. I don't think anybody's stock goes down with this scrap here. Like Oralbai and that ancestral DNA, man, that fight could have been stopped probably a couple of times. I'm glad the ref let it go though, because it's like he's getting dummied on the ground, and next thing you look, he's got a double leg and he's taking Rebecki down. I think if that fight was longer, I think Oralbai probably takes it. At the end of that 3rd round, Rebecki was cooked.
He had
Nothing. And Oralbai was like, you could see him shaking out his arms like they do in the corner, because he's like, all right, I'm going to throw a combo. Let's fucking wave these things out here, and then bam, bam, gets them. That was incredible. It's important to note, I think, that Rebecki's cut was due to a head clash on these guys going in. So I always wonder how that's going to work when these things come to a decision, right? Because what if they don't think that's a head clash and they don't get the chance to see it, which is
great point.
The judging is a different conversation in itself, because we saw some
especially when you're in the Middle East.
Yeah, totally. They definitely like their guys to win though. But I think this one, the right guy won, right? Rebecki definitely put in some work early. Really,
I mean, it could have went either way to me, but that's how I had it.
Yeah, really. It was kind of dicey in some of those moments for both guys. So go watch that fight back is all that comes out of that one. That's my biggest takeaway, because I don't think it will get fight of the night or fight of the year just because of the stakes, right? I think stakes come into play big time in fight of the year conversations as far as titles on the line. But I think it deserves to be in that conversation. So highly recommend going back and watching that bad boy. And then Basharat versus Hugo. Hugo came in 10 pounds overweight, Scott. I didn't see that till this morning. And that is absolutely outrageous. Basharat weighed in. Basharat didn't. This fight was at featherweight. Basharat didn't even bother going up to 45. He weighed in at 137, and Hugo was 145 and a half. So always kind of hate to see that. I kind of just always root for the guy that missed weight to get his head bashed in a little bit. But I know that's
yeah. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen that. And Dana White was asked about that, and they were like, when did you find out that Hugo missed weight by 10 pounds? And he was like, just now. It's just like kind of an indictment on Dana White, by the way. But like that is like pretty insane. Like you can't find a replacement. What's even crazier is that the line moved in Basharat's favor, where it's like, if it were me, like I love Basharat. I think he's like a really strong prospect, but if you're ceding 9 pounds to your opponent, like I'm going to bet on the heavier fighter just about every single time. And he was like a heavy favorite in this. But yeah, he won the fight. Huge win for him. It's one of those things where like people are going to forget about this in 3 years, and like it could have hurt him if he lost. Totally. But that's a huge win. You take on someone 10 pounds, 9 pounds heavier than you. I think that's huge. And so I think we've got a nice little prospect here.
Yeah, no, I think both Basharat brothers, I call them the Bash Bros, Javid and Fareed, I think are both really good prospects. And yeah, he pieced him up a little bit. Hugo almost got some nasty leg locks on him there in some of the scramble situations, but that was really all he had for Basharat. Hit some shots as you're going to in a fight, but nothing that kind of put him in danger. So hats off to Basharat for kind of overcoming that, because a lot of guys would have not taken that fight. Some commissions would not allow that fight potentially. And usually you'll see that guy who does want to make weight go at least kind of hydrate up to the same weight as the other guy. But Basharat just said, fuck it, let's go. So that was, gotta love the spirit there. And then looking at did you see any Bruno Silva, Ismail Nardiev?
I did not.
No. Okay. So Nardiev came out super sharp, super bursty. I made some notes because I knew we were going to be talking about this. These fights started at 7 a.m. for me. So this was a long time ago, just for reference, but it was glorious to wake up with a coffee and some scraps. I'll tell you that. But yeah, Nardiev mixed the wrestling and the strikes really, really well. He had a really slick back take in that first round, pretty dominant win. Some really cool strikes. So, like I call it like the Khabib position, Khabib position 2.0, not where he has the wrist around the back, but where he's face on with the dude and he has the legs tied up in a figure four under his legs. Well, what Nardiev was doing was he wasn't trying to advance that position. He was just using his head to control. And then he would come back and he was hitting elbows and little punches that were super, super nice in that spot. It's almost like he postured up to his knees, but the guy wasn't down. The guy was here. So it was just kind of really cool to see him kind of, I just don't think I'd seen that very often, I guess, which seems like you would, because it's a pretty advantageous, or guys just aren't able to get as good of shots in that position. So I thought that was a really good showing for Nardiev. Second stint in the UFC. So it'll be good to see the guy get another fight and see how he can potentially come up in that division. And then last, but I guess not least, it was a really good showing for Carlos Leal against Rinat Fakhretdinov. Awesome way to open up the card, actually. What am I talking about? That fight was badass. I think not much defense. The only real defense that I saw was Carlos Leal defending Rinat's takedowns, but they were really busting each other up. Both of them looked like they had been in a fight.
It was a controversial decision, right?
It was awful. A 30-27 for Fakhretdinov is criminal, because he could have lost. I would say he was closer to losing all three than he was to winning all three.
Who was the one with like extreme back knee who like looked jacked out of his mind?
That was Leal. Yeah, that was Carlos Leal, because he was coming in on short notice, right? They pulled him in after Nursultan Ruzabayev had to fall out. I think that was within a week of the fight. And yeah, so who knows what was happening there. But for a guy debuting in the UFC, it's kind of hard to see them having his drug test results right away, as well as his medicals all ready to go within a few days. But sometimes the UFC does what the fuck they want. Let's talk about, you watched the press conference. My apologies, buddy. I wasn't able to watch it just because I got into kind of family mode after that card. But tell me about the presser. You said that Dana made some comments about Ngannou. Is that what you were going to jump into there?
Yeah, I just think it's worth mentioning is
Yeah.
like he really came down hard on Ngannou. So at Power Slap, I don't know, he said something, it went viral, and then Ngannou said something which went viral. So they had to bring it back up to Dana, where Ngannou was saying the UFC still owes him money and he's happy now, or because he's making twice as much as he ever would with the UFC. And then Dana said, when have we ever owed a fighter money? So that's bullshit. And he would have made more with us. And I don't know, he just took some shots. He told a story where he was saying, he said Ngannou is not a good person. And I've said this from the start. Like he pretends like he's a good person. He pretends like he doesn't speak English, but this is not a good person. He owes us money for how bad that Derek Lewis fight was. He's like, here's a story. Maybe I'll tell it one day. I wanted to cut Ngannou and the matchmakers wouldn't let me. And I said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And so, I didn't cut him. He becomes champion. And then we run into all this bullshit. And then the reporter's like, well, like, doesn't that show you're wrong? Because like you tried to cut him and then he became champion. It's like, no, because he's like a shitty person. I don't want to do business with this guy. And it just seems a little much, a little extreme. But like, where my stance is on Dana is like, he could do no wrong in my book because he's just so entertaining. He just doesn't give a fuck. He tells it like it is. He's so much fun. He always does what's in the best interest for the UFC in terms of like an entertainment factor. And so like, I come from the NFL side where like everything is so lame and boring and sterilized, except for like Jerry Jones, who's like 900 years old and like constantly
R.I.P. Al Davis.
Yeah, it doesn't give a single, like those guys are awesome. Those guys are fun. Yeah. Like when Jerry Jones dies, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to miss him. We're going to lose something. It's going to get even more boring. So appreciate Dana while you got him. I will say, that seemed a bit much for me. But it's also like I don't care about the other I'm not an MMA fan. I'm a UFC fan. So like Francis is never coming back. So like, I just don't care about him anymore. Like Tom Aspinall excites me. This upcoming fight kind of excites me. And so that's my read on it. I just thought it was worth mentioning. I'd also like to do a little bit of matchmaking, but any thoughts on Frankie Ngannou versus Dana White?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really hard to see Francis being a bad person. You know what I mean? And first off, he does fucking speak English and he doesn't try and say he doesn't speak English. He speaks very eloquent English at that. So I kind of see that as being bullshit. I'm kind of in the same boat with Dana too. Like I hate some of the shit he says, but I just can't hate him because he's built something that we love by doing exactly this. And he just doesn't give a fuck. And I think you have to admire some of that, right? He'll go toe to toe with anybody. He'll call Bob Arum a stupid piece of shit in a press conference and just not care. Like he is who he is, and you got to respect him for what he's built. You know what I mean? So some of the shit he says is pretty wild, especially going after Ngannou like that. But I mean, the line about that Derek Lewis fight was kind of funny. But I love Francis Ngannou. I think he is really awesome, and he might not be in the big leagues necessarily, but he's doing what he can. And he is absolutely making more money than he would have in the UFC. 100%. Those boxing fights alone, one of those boxing fights is more than he ever made in the UFC combined. Yeah. Dana's trying to pay him $500,000 per fight here. And his opponents are making $2 million in the PFL. So
right.
You
caught him on his BS right there.
Yeah. Well, and Dana just like, I don't know. Dana will take any shot he can at Ngannou, and as of late, any other heavyweight who even sniffs challenging John Jones's throne.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like he's a little threatened, honestly, because like the hype for John Jones just seems like so much. Like I feel like that has to have to do with I feel like that has to do with Ngannou, and it came out of nowhere, and it's just like I don't know about this. For a guy who's popped and you're hyping up the Stipe fight, which no one wants. If he's really the GOAT, like put him up against Tom, please.
Yeah. Which will be our next card as well. UFC 309. November 16th is the card, so look for the next episode during that week. As you mentioned, Scott, I figured I'd get that little plug in. But let's do some matchmaking. We already talked about Ilia Topuria and where he goes next. It's going to be Volk, and then it's looking potentially like Diego Lopez is kind of the next guy in line, but a lot of things could happen in that time.
I mean, he can move up too. He can cross weight classes, and I kind of like his odds with that.
Yeah, he'd definitely have a bit of a size disadvantage, but he's a destroyer.
Or sure. Maybe move down. maybe Islam's a different story. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
that's the one, the top 2 pound for pounds. I don't know about that one.
But speaking of moving up, do you think Max Holloway's next fight is a BMF title fight at 155?
I think this is the last. I think this is the last we see of him at featherweight, and I think that's the right move.
Yeah.
I think he goes back to lightweight. I think it's an immediate BMF fight. The question is, who is it up against? I could see it being Dustin Poirier, who, wants to be fighting for belts. This matters to him, avenging the BMF loss. But could it also be Conor? Does he just take Dan Hooker, or does he go for the actual belt with a less, manufactured fight? After this card ended, Conor tweeted at Dana saying, "Call me." And so they brought this up. And so I could see him going for a max BMF fight at lightweight. I think that'd be really interesting. By the way, Conor lost like $500,000 or 500,000 euros on his bet. But I don't know. He seemed cogent. It didn't seem like he was drunk or on cocaine.
Nothing.
His tweets justifying the bets seemed cogent and smart, and apparently he's up 6 million this year. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he said. But anyway, so yeah, what do you think is next for Max Holloway?
I think you're kind of right on the right track there, right? I think the hard thing for me about Conor is I just have a hard time seeing Conor making 155. I know actually he has looked a little more trim than expected when we see training video, but he does look pretty jacked though. You know what I mean? So who knows if he's making 155 again? I know he doesn't necessarily, it seems like he doesn't want his next fight to be at 55. He probably wants to go 170 before he starts making that cut again. But if he did, Max is the fight that I'd want to see. And Max, I think, would be the fight that Conor would want, right? That belt being on the line, something that he could get. He just wants to stack belts. So I think that's probably the one that he wants the most. For Max, one that I would really like is that BMF belt, depending on what happens in the fight against Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler, to see Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira duke it out at 155. They had a previous fight at 145. Max was doing really well, but I think he punched him in like the trachea. It was like a trachea injury where Oliveira just kind of stopped it because trachea is pretty fucking important. So that's what happened there. I'd like to see that fight again, maybe with the BMF. I think Charles is somebody deserving of a BMF fight. Michael Chandler, I don't think is deserving of a BMF fight, to be completely honest, but I think he might say something different. But walk on, brother. That's one of his little sayings, is walk on.
Right.
See you at the top. So that's what I'd kind of like to see. Same track, right? BMF, Dustin Poirier is the trilogy fight would be great, but Poirier's got 2 wins against him, which would be I don't think it'd be a tough sell with their names, though, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe UFC would do it at welterweight, but it's Max versus Conor, just to give Conor that nice little weight advantage.
Yeah, that'd be kind of funny. Hey, it'd be wild to see Max get up to 170. Or I wonder if
that's the point, is I don't think he would, right? And so it's just, give up 4 pounds to Conor to improve his odds.
Yeah, which,
because he's the cash cow, so you give him all favors. But who knows? I don't know. But I kind of like Max's odds in this lightweight division.
Yeah, no, he showed really well against Gaethje and just kind of proved to us that our worries about him going up are not things that we need to be worried about. So Khamzat, we said title shot next. Do we think he probably waits for that fight, or does he have another one? And if so, who do you think it could be?
Yeah, I think he kind of waits. I mean, who else would you give him to? Like,
I'm about to pull up the rankings here. And
so Sean fights Dricus. I mean, so Izzy would be amazing, but there's no way Izzy takes that. Izzy would just get destroyed. Dizzy would get, that would not go.
He watched what happened against Robert Whittaker, and he's I think I'm going to wait a little bit and see.
But this is what I've been saying about the middleweight division, is like, okay, Izzy was a great champ, like legendary run he went on, but he's never had this level of competition before. And like, I think Drickus is good. I think Strickland's good, but I mean, just on a whole nother level. Who was it? Eric Nixick who tweeted it out, where it's like Bo Nickel might be your only hope. And even then, I mean, like the dude is so freaking raw. I mean, he might need to wait till Khamzat's out of his prime before we start talking about that.
And MMA wrestling is a little bit different than American college wrestling too, right? And I think Khamzat is expert level MMA wrestler, as he proved. What about Rob Whittaker? Like, what's next for him? Is he fun fight gatekeeper at this point?
Yeah, I think so. I like to see him against Cow Barallo Drink.
Caio Baralho.
his name is Cow Barallo Drink.
Cow Baralho Drink is what his name is. Yeah, so I like that fight too.
I mean, dude, I'm so sick of Paulo Costa. I'm so sick of Marvin Vittori. How old is Jared Cannonier now? It's just like, please, come on.
Totally. You got other guys like Nasruddin Imavov in there. Caio Baralho Drink is in there. So we've got some other young guys, but yeah, there's that. It's like that little stack of old guard that's just there. So once those guys start getting picked off, I think we're going to see some nice new blood at the top of that 185 division, headlined by one Khamzat Chimaev. Holy shit. Ankalaev next fight's against Pereira. It's got to be. Dana already said that. Rakic, do we need to spend much time on him, Scott? Like, I think he's going to have some fun fights, but I think we need to see another one before we're really serious about matchmaking for him. What do you think?
Yeah. He needs a few prove it fights, but like, again, like you could say each of the last three were washes, and he was up against the second best fighter in the division, maybe the best, and he thought he was up 2-0. And then before that, Staff, before that, ACL. So there might be something there, but I mean, we really need to see that.
Yeah, super talented. I kind of see him in like that five-star outfielder prospect that comes into the league, but then ends up just turning into a platoon guy. You know what I mean? Where he's just kind of splitting time with somebody. So Rakic has those tools, just hasn't necessarily been able to put them together as of yet. Lerone Murphy called out Josh Emmett. I don't think you were necessarily not on board with that fight. I think you just probably kind of thought he was probably not making the right call for his future, taking on a destroyer like Josh Emmett.
Yeah, dude, I just think Josh Emmett is like insanely underrated and just like a killer knockout artist. So like he should fear for his life a little bit more with that. But maybe I'm too high on Emmett. Who knows? He's like 40 years old.
He's getting up there, 38, 39, 40 area. I'm not nearly as high on Emmett, actually. I kind of see him as just a guy with power kind of thing.
Well, he looks like Rorschach from the movie based on the graphic novel by Alan Moore, whatever that's called.
Talked about Dan Ige, fun fight gatekeeper. He's going to be, let's go to Shara Bullet because he called out Izzy Adesanya. I don't think that's necessary.
Sorry.
Oh, the Watchmen. Okay. Beauty. Yeah, I'll put that picture up.
I'll send you go on.
Hopefully the people that get what you're I'm sorry. And Scott, that's a caveat about me being on this podcast. References, not my strong suit. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And if we want to make that a bit and laugh at me for it, I'm happy to do that because there's going to be some blatant ones that I'm just not going to understand. So Shara Bullet, 185. We talked about some of those names. Like Imavov is at 4. Caio Baralho Drink is at 5. I don't know if they'll necessarily be putting Shara Bullet against those guys. I could see him getting one of the old guards, like a Cannonier, like a mouth-breathing Marvin, like a Costa. Yeah. Do you think he even goes that high, though? Do you think they feed him to one of those guys yet?
No, probably not. I think they just keep giving him layups / just like entertaining stand and bang fights. And I think that's what he should do. I don't think this is a fighter who's ever going to come close to sniffing a championship, but we could have some fun in the meantime,
Totally. What about Michel Pereira? He's number 14 at 185 right now.
That's a good one.
Dude, I like capoeira backflips and shit with Shara Bullet spinning stuff. That would be really fun. Because you look at 13 and 12, Chimaev, Fluffy Hernandez, 11, Jack Hermanson. All those guys are just going to take him to the ground and just put him out. So I think Pereira would be fun if they want to get him a ranked fighter. Chris Curtis also as well would be a nice stand and bang scrap. So sniffing that top 15 would be kind of fun for Shara Bullet.
I'm a big Fluffy guy, by the way. That
Oh,
last
dude,
fight,
he's so dope. He's so dope. And then have you seen his interviews? He's like an even doper guy than he is a
yeah.
fighter. Like he just seems like a dude that you would want to chill with. So big Fluffy Hernandez fan over here too. Should we start? Like it's a bit of a crapshoot when we get into these prelim guys. Scott, is there any guys in particular that you wanted to matchmake for?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I think we'll probably wrap up here. A lot of good guys. Let's just keep an eye out on the matchmaking for them because, like we said, Oralbai is a guy we really liked. Rebechki is now a guy that we really like. Abus Magomedov seems like he's got some promise. The Bash Bros, etc., etc., etc. So thanks for hopping on with me, Scott. Shout out to both of our wives for kind of allowing us to get in on a bit of an impromptu recording session here because we were so hyped on UFC 308. Shout out to TJ and Stefan who weren't able to make it. But like I said, you'll see them on that UFC 309 episode that we have coming before that John Jones and Stipe Miocic fight. So
yeah, spoilers. Really, TJ is the world's biggest Stipe fan, and I think he believes he's gonna win. So that's gonna be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I said in the group chat, it's next we got John Jones fight week and just deadpan. It's actually Stipe fight week, he says. So
that's right.
Very on brand, TJ. And I'm excited to dive deeper and deeper into the GogoPoda brand that you guys have all created. So again, thanks for having me, Scott. Anybody listening, go follow on YouTube, follow on social media, working on getting to more platforms other than Spotify. So bear with us there. And then thanks for already listening. We had good reception. Like I said, love to see some comments, love to see some likes, start talking with the people and kind of growing some community around the show. So for Scott Barrett, I am Travis Seal. This has been the GogoPoda UFC show. We will see you next time. Peace.
This is a business, and it's the business of warfare.
They're selling y'all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Shit.
I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Their game plan is to go in there, them with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.